Good morning. It's good to see everybody. If we don't know anybody, if you're here, if you're new joining us online, my name is Brian Jones. And if you're new, that's not a bad place to be. Our children's ministry this week thought it would be interesting to ask children in our children's ministry if they even knew who I was. So anyway, take a look. Watch this.
I have a question for you. I was wondering if you know who this man is. You don't know who he is?
No. I don't know. No.
Have you seen him around?
I saw him at Target a long time ago.
You saw him at Target a long time ago?
He and his wife do the prayers in the big lobby.
Oh, okay. Do you happen to know his name by any chance?
No.
No?
I'm just gonna guess like Steve.
You think he's a good preacher?
He thinks he's funny.
How old do you think Mr. Brian is?
That's a hard question. Really old.
Really old?
70.
70?
100.
You think his dog thinks Brian's a good friend?
No.
No? Why not? Does he look friendly to you?
The dog's face.
Yeah, that dog does look a little scared. Does the doggy look happy or?
The doggy looks, I don't know, it looks like it has like mixed emotions.
Yeah. What do you think he's thinking about in this picture? He's like looking off to the distance.
Come on, I want my food, I'm hungry.
Do you think that this man looks like athletic?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Do you have any fashion advice for Pastor Brian?
Longer shorts.
Longer shorts.
His shorts aren't long enough.
His shorts.
Looks too short.
Too short? Too short for your style? Would you give him any fashion advice?
I'd wear that too.
See, he'd wear that too. That's not out of style. It's not out of style. You know when the first piece of advertisement ever happened among human beings? 5,000 years ago, there was a flyer advertisement where it said, "The shop of Hapu the Weaver, where the best cloth is woven to your desires." Can you believe that? Advertising been around for 5,000 years. One of the most interesting pieces of ancient advertising was found in the Roman city of Pompeii, which was close to the volcanic eruption of Vesuvius in 79, blanketed the city. When archaeologists pulled back the blanket of time, they discovered something interesting. In 33% of the homes of Pompeii, they discovered jars with the inscription, "The best liquimon product of Scaurus." Umbricus Scaurus was the fish maker that basically had cornered the market on 33% of the homes in Pompeii simply because of branding. Now that's the power of advertising. When you get to the New World, you notice newspapers are selling advertising. Cities would put up boards where people could post bills or advertisements on these billboards and advertise their wares. And so advertising became a very normal part of our culture. But something happened in 1994. I'm going to put up a picture and you tell me what this is. It's a banner ad. AT&T, 1994, placed the very first banner ad, and then things changed and we were off to the races. 1996, a company named DoubleClick was formed to sell these banner ads. In 1998, a company named Google was formed to aggregate links for people to search. In 2000, Google began selling advertising called Google AdWords, followed by in 2007, Facebook started selling ads. In 2009, YouTube started selling ads, and we now have the situation that we're facing ourselves right now. I hate to say this, just following this beautiful kids video, but we have a situation where almost no one is aware of the incredibly powerful and sick things that have been done to our brains. I don't know if you know this, but online there is an avatar version of your life. With the advent of the iPhone, with the advent of cookies, and with the advent of artificial intelligence, you now have an avatar that people are buying online. I talk to advertising marketers all the time about how they will go and find people who visit sites, who have particular product behaviors, who will live in certain areas, frequent certain times, amount of time on the phone, that sort of thing. You exist online, and with the help of artificial intelligence and armed with the phrases of the best psychologists in the world and the best copywriting practices in the world and the latest insights on neuroprogramming to manipulate our minds, and accompanied by $590 billion on advertising sales, more than the GDP of Sweden, Poland, Iran, Austria, Norway, Israel, and South Africa, our brains have now changed. I talk with men all the time who are addicted to pornography. They can tell me the very first time they saw a pornographic image. This beautiful picture, a video, a choreographed scene, a beautiful woman, always in their early 20s, before kids, always a man in their early to mid 20s, choreographed in such a way to elicit a sexual response. The second time, it takes a little bit harder hit to get the same dopamine fix. And then a little bit harder, and a little bit harder, and a little bit harder. And you talk to a man today that has been watching pornography since he was a kid, and you realize his actual brain has changed. What's even sadder is that some of you that have boys, you have no idea. This is happening right under your nose, starting in 4th grade and 5th grade. Our brains, in a sickened way, have been changed for all of us. Social scientists estimate that the average human being is exposed to upwards of 10,000 marketing messages a day. By the time someone reaches 18, they have seen 65 billion marketing messages. Our children in their lifetimes will see, look at this, 313 billion marketing messages during their lifetimes. The result, the very processes of our brains have been rewired, and we have been trained to be dissatisfied with everything in our lives. Today we're beginning a new series of talks called Asking for a Friend. We're asking the question today, sorry, that's Dr. Evil. My wife Lisa didn't even know who that was. She was like, I don't like that photo. I'm like, that's Dr. Evil. How can you not like Dr. Evil? She said, I don't know, I just don't like him. So anyway, sorry about that. We're asking the question today, why do I need church? And it's a legit question in the age of COVID. Since COVID has happened, 1 in 3 practicing Christians in the United States have stopped attending their pre-COVID church. Many have stopped attending church altogether. And so a very real and honest question to ask is, why do I need this? Why do I need the trouble of getting everybody ready on a Sunday morning, showing up and doing this thing and being involved in this church? Why can't I just do my own thing and live my life? Because it's so much easier, right? Now, the reason people even ask this question in the first place, if you're a disciple of Jesus and you have picked up your cross to follow him, and you're willing to follow him to the death for the rest of your life, come hell or high water, if you are the true disciple of Jesus and you're asking the question, why do I need church? It's because your brain has been altered. So what happens is that those of us, and it's everybody's brain that's been altered, me included, We tend to view everything in our lives as a transaction. A transaction occurs when someone hands money to someone, receives goods for a service. You show up to Wawa and you give them the money. Like my wife says, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. She gets a 24 ounce. I tell her that's 3 cups of coffee, but she didn't, I want to get a cup of coffee. I hand them the money. They give me the coffee and the coffee doesn't taste good. The transaction is bad. Something's wrong with the transaction. I didn't get what I paid for. What happens is that we now, because our brains have changed, we view people and church through the lens of transactions. Listen to the way we talk about church in 2021. We go church what? Shopping, right? You go check it out, and then you let me know that I will go check it out, because we're in a phase right now where we're shopping for churches. You'll be like, the reason we're going to go to church is because we need friends. Think about that. I need to get something out of this group of people, rather than we need to go to church because we need to be friends for people that need friends. In 2000, when our church opened in the Regal 24 Cinema in Oaks, after church that day, a man visited. He and his wife, and he had 3 kids. Shook my hand, and I said, hey, man, great. It was great to meet you. Look forward to getting to know you more, and we'll see you next week. He said, oh, no, that's not going to happen, because years ago, the Lord told us to go to a different church every Sunday. Now, I just met him. What do you think I said? In my very gracious, sensitive, I said, that is quite possibly the sickest and most cruelest thing you could ever do to these kids. I looked at me, I was like, why? Why would you say that? The Lord told me. I'm like, trust me. The Lord didn't tell you that. But I'll tell you, if the Lord was here, I'll tell you exactly what he would say. Is that you need to be a part of a church. These kids need to be a part of a church family. They need to be a part of a redemptive community of Jesus, because all you're doing is viewing people and churches as products that you're going to consume. See, the church is God's plan A. There is no plan B. To fix the world, God's idea is the church, and he puts right at the beginning of what is called the book of Acts, basically the Acts of the Apostle, primarily the story of Peter and then Paul starting the new church based as disciples of Jesus. There's this beautiful description of the church. There once was a church unmarred by 313 billion marketing messages. And look what happened in that community. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone that had need. Every day they continued to meet together with the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all of the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. People were like, I want to be a part of that church. As we read in the book of Acts, we very quickly see that the early church began meeting on Sunday morning. It was called the Lord's Day, where the Eucharist, Holy Communion, was the center part of this transcendent experience with God. And then during the week, they would meet from home to homes. On Sunday morning, when they met, 4 things always happened. Number 1, they learned about Jesus from the apostles. Number 2, they shared their lives with one another. Fellowship does not mean eating donuts and drinking coffee 15 minutes before church. Fellowship means I have $100 in my pocket. I see someone that is in need. How could the love of God be in me if someone is going through a difficult time and I don't share my money and my time and my resources and my car and my truck and my home with them? They worship and then take the Lord's Supper, and then they pray the prayers. Here's the thing. None of this can be done alone. Here's why you need church. You can't do that alone. Look at all the words that are used to describe this incredible community. Awe, together, glad, sincere, enjoying, growth. This is everything people are missing when they are trapped in a transactional relationship. Okay, I need everybody to pull out a pen, and I need you at home to pull out a pen, and I need you to write down this verse. Pull your phone out. If you start texting, what will happen? You'll die. So here we go. There's a verse I want you to write down. It's the most important thing that I'm going to say today. It may be one of the most important verses you ever hear in your spiritual walk, ever. Look at this. I do not say that lightly. Acts chapter 10, verse 38. Jesus went around doing good and healing all those who were under the power of the devil. Did I skip the part where I talked about the number of marketing messages? Did I skip that? Did I skip the part where I talked about how we have an avatar, how we have artificial intelligence? Did I skip the part where I talked about, like, there's more money spent in this church, in this country to change your brain? That is what Jesus needs to heal. In the first century's healing, actual physical illness and that sort of thing, what he has to heal is the actual brains that have been sullied and warped to think that you and we're product to consume. That's what we need to heal. Let me show you this. Let me show you this picture right here. Well, okay, so there's this verse, and you don't need to bring this up. Matthew 16 says, Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. In other words, the devil knows that in an Acts 2 church, the kind of church I just described, people who are not willing to, people who have had their minds healed of the destruction that's been wrought by constant bombardment of marketing, people who are not going to live by transactional relationships, that the devil knows that authentic community on the right-hand side, he has no chance against those people. Absolutely no chance at all. But the absolute vast majority of Christians watching this, and you'll rewatch it, people that are here, the vast majority of people in this room right now are living in the left side. It's called Pseudo Community. This is the place where no one knows the real you. This is the place where you don't know the real other person. This is the place where you can get upset by there's something you didn't like about your second grader's class, or I said something in a sermon 3 years ago, or the youth pastor did something, or Melissa said this in a message, or there's this one particular thing that you taught and that sort of thing, and people would just leave. In pseudo community, people's brains have been hijacked and not healed by Jesus. And so what they do is they view church as a consumer experience in relationships as transactional in nature. As long as I'm getting fed by the sermon, as long as the music is moving or a certain person is singing the music, as long as my group, it goes on and on and on, then I'm here. But the moment I'm not getting something out of it, I'm gone. It is our practice as a church that if you are coming from another church and you want to place your membership at our church, you'll go through our membership class and say, I'm going to sign on the dotted line to sign a membership covenant. We will ask you this simple question. Are you coming from another church, and did you have conflict there that you have left unresolved? In other words, there was a conversation that you avoided. And if you say yes, then we will tell you, oh, I'm sorry, you can't sign this yet. Because you need to go back to that church first. have that very difficult conversation, and then come back here and sign the membership covenant. We would be doing you and that church and our community incredible disservice by allowing you to think that church is something you shop for. It is a transaction. I'm not being fed. And so here's a little secret that I need to make very, very clear for those of you who have come on Friend Day, where you're thinking that we are that kind of church. The one thing that happens, can you bring the picture back up here? There we go. The one thing that happens in order to get to real, authentic community that we're trying to build here, Acts chapter 2 community, is what we would call the tunnel of chaos. These are the very difficult and painful conversations that you have to have in order to have real community. Anybody knows if you have a successful family, it is on the other side of what? Pain. There's a whole lot of pain to create a healthy, functioning, authentic community. You have to let your mask down. You have to learn how to fight fair. You need to learn how to meet one another's needs and resolve conflict. We'll just call it the tunnel of chaos. And so for those of you who are joining on Friend Day, we want you to become a part of this church, but you need to understand the one indispensable part of joining this church is suffering. Primarily because I'm going to have some bad sermons. I just need to let you know, okay? But suffering in the sense that if you could bring the picture back up here, is that if we're going to go to authentic community, it's going to come through the tunnel of chaos. It's going to come from the point where we say, I actually need to have that conversation with that person. We are not going to bolt. We're not going to leave. We're going to work this thing out, and it's on the other side of that. Then you have authentic and real community. And so I just wrote down, church is not an institution that we join. We are the church. And we can choose whether we're going to be a pseudo church or whether we're going to be an authentic church. Authentic church doesn't mean we're a perfect church. It just means we're authentic. Now I want to ask everybody in this room to do 3 things. Number 1 is this. One church family every week for 20 years. If this is your church, fantastic. Stick. If you're shopping, find the church and then stick. What I want you to do is I want you to plant a church on your property, or I want you to plant a tree on your property. So a few years ago, as Frank calls it, we moved to the sticks. I wanted to get a golden retriever and some land to run and possibly some farm animals and that sort of thing. Just something to do with my hands, because I live in my head all day long, thinking and creating and writing, that kind of stuff. So when we got it, it has really taught me something over the last few years. When we got it, it was trashed. I mean, there were beer cans and bottles and traffic signs and junk and crap all over this place. And so I just spent days just cleaning this whole thing out. And what we've been doing the last few years is healing the land. Because I don't own this place. I'm just simply a stewardship of it. At some point, I'm going to hand it off to someone else. Your property is the exact same thing. You're a steward of it, and you're going to give it to someone else, and you want to give it in better shape. So we're cutting and trimming and reseeding and planting trees. So we planted a bunch of arborvitaes and Norway spruce, and ran out of money because we have a wedding coming up, and I wanted to do some Colorado blues and different trees. Those of you who are into this kind of stuff, you know what I'm talking about. And so we planted what we could plant. And the thing is that when we first came there, we planted some Norway spruces, the prototypical Christmas tree looking tree. I went out there this weekend, and you know how much our Norway spruce has grown? 18 inches in 3 years. I'm like, come on, dude, what are you doing? Let's go. What is, I want to walk out into Wyoming. This is taking forever, man. There's this old saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. the next best time to plant a tree is today. And so what I want you to do is I want you to find that church. It's going to be imperfect, and you're going to commit to going through the tunnel of chaos. You are committing to be a disciple of Jesus and to pick up your cross and suffer. There will be painful times, and there will be wonderful times and everything in between. But you are going to commit to that church, and you are going to plant a tree, and you can only think about possibly leaving that church when that tree is big enough for your entire family to go out and have a meal in its shade. Here's the second thing. Stop double dipping, triple dipping, and quadruple dipping. Now, let me give you some caveats. Let me tell you what I mean by that. A sure sign that your brain has not been healed from the corruption that our society has brought on your brain is that you view church as a consumer experience. You shop for a church. If you don't like it, you go somewhere else. I understand in the age of COVID that people are watching online. I want to tell you, those of you who are watching online, we're so incredibly privileged and glad and humbled that you would join us. If you're joining us because there is no church where you're from, we want to be your church. I have a friend, lives in New Mexico. Like, it's literally 60 miles to the closest deal. We have a group that is in North Carolina that's the same way. We have a group in Oregon that they come together on Sunday night and they watch our services. And we're so incredibly glad, and we're a part of you and what's going on there. If you're a part of a church somewhere, you're watching online, maybe in another state, and you're a part of that church, and what you see here with the worship and the groups and the different ministries and the sermons are a supplement to help your church, we're so incredibly thankful, and we want you to keep watching. We give away our worship stuff. We give away our camp stuff. We give away stretch. We give away group stuff. I give away sermons. That's what we do. We want to help other churches. But if you are actively a part of a church and you're watching me because you think your pastor's sermons suck, please never watch this again. If you're a part of a church because you think your music sucks, please never watch this feed again. If you're here in person and there's 2 or 3 other churches that you're visiting and you think the worship, the kids, whatever it is, and you're hodgepodging this thing together, it's time that you commit, okay? It's time that you commit. We will not be a part of creating and further exacerbating transactional relationships. One church every week for 20 years. I want to end by saying this. My mom and dad met in junior high school at the church where I grew up as a kid. My dad said, I'm going to go back there because I met a girl who has nice legs. Got involved in the youth group. He eventually became a leader at that church. He stayed there his whole life. It was only 10 years later, 10 years ago, that they had a pastor that was teaching false doctrine, false teaching. Tried to correct it, he wouldn't. He said, I can't be a part of this, and left, broke his heart. So they've been a part of one church for 40 years, 45 years, and another church for the last decade. We're asking the question, why church? Here's why. Over the past 60-some years, my parents have lived through the clapping in church controversy of 1976. The mediocre church softball teams of the 90s. They've seen people get married, have children, and those children get married and have children. They have seen hundreds of people come to Christ, and some of those people fall by the wayside. They have buried dear friends. They have served with great pastors, mediocre pastors, and terrible pastors. Usually all in the same pastor. They have heard incredible sermons, okay sermons, and terrible sermons. They've heard great worship, okay worship, and terrible worship. Through calm and tumultuous years, my parents have given, served, and prayed their entire lives in the local church family. And one day in the future, both my mom and dad will pass away. They will be surrounded by countless people that they have poured their lives into and they've gone through the tunnel of chaos with. And right before they pass, they will look around and they will savor something that someone who has spent a lifetime church hopping and viewing church as a transactional experience will never experience. They will look back and relish the dangerous conversations they didn't avoid, sins they were encouraged to confront, and authentic Christian friendships it took a lifetime to develop. And Jesus wants you to experience that, but you've got to commit. Are you in or out? Are you going to be the church or consume the church? Let's pray. As your pupils, as your apprentices, as we learn how to do life from you, you understand how hard it is. When our very brains are working against us, heal us, Lord. Touch our minds and our souls. Help us to fast. Help us to fast from the things of the world that warp the way we see people. Help us to be friends. Help us to be the church. Help us to suffer gladly in your name like the first disciples. Help us to pick up our crosses and follow you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for watching today's message. Make sure to check out Brian's new book, Finding Favor, God's Blessings Beyond Health, Wealth, and Happiness. To sign up for Brian's newsletter, please go to Brian's website at brianjones.com.